Welcome back to the Run Radio podcast. My name's Trina. I always like to have guests on that are innovative, also relentlessly resilient because they're doing things the way they want to see them get done. And I really love having writers on because it takes a certain grit to get a book from an idea onto paper. So I welcome my guest, Stephen Maine.
Thank you so much for having me, Trina. It's great to be
Yeah.
here.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I would love to know a little bit about your writing process. But first of all, how long have you been writing and when did you decide you're going to make all of that idea stuff into a book?
So I kind of started enjoying writing mostly with poetry in high school and such. But what actually ended up happening was in college, I went to Evangel University, nearby. And I ended up having to get, general electives, ended up taking creative writing, just to, needed an extra art class, had my general classes being like my degrees in theology. But so I ended up going with that. Ended up loving the class, like absolutely loving it. It was always kind of funny being in a class like that, especially going to like a general Christian school, because I generally write horror. Like I like writing things to kind of mess with people a little bit. I enjoy it. It's fun. So you have everybody in your class, and they're amazing authors, but they generally have like other tones and stuff, generally more like romance, comedic, or just like general literary, phenomenal. And then you had me in the class who was like, well, let's see what we're gonna do.
Let's make it weird and uncomfortable.
Let's make it weird.
Yes.
But my professor ended up coming to me and being like, I'm gonna be honest, she's like, you should take my creative writing 2 class. I generally don't suggest it because the class was essentially just you write a novella. It's very hands-off. You write a novella, you send her edits, you go work back and forth. It's not like a whole class, it's more of a workshop.
Oh, neat.
So she essentially was like, hey, I really like what you write. You should join this. So I ended up taking that my last semester. Very interesting. That was literally like in the throes of COVID. It was my last class that I did for my college career at all. And ended up writing a short novella that would actually become my debut novel, the one that I just did the book signing for. So I ended up taking that a couple years later, had kind of a moment after, kind of, sometimes you just kind of lose yourself, not actually being able to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. And looked at my wife one day and was like, I'm an idiot. And she goes, well, I'm trying all this other garbage, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And she's like, what? I was like, I need to write a book.
Yeah.
So that ended up being what became known as Teen Death on Desecrated Faith and Newfound Religion, which is the one that I just recently released a couple months back.
So where do you pull this creative, I guess, inspiration from? I mean, I know when you were talking about Evangel, it is a certain type of vibe there for sure. So did you ever struggle with feeling like you were going against the grain?
Oh, consistently. Oh,
Yeah.
so much. So
Yeah.
I there was an ongoing joke at Evangel that like I was pretty well known on campus, but the ongoing joke was that I was the cryptid of Evangel, kind of like the Bigfoot of Evangel. I took it as a compliment fully.
Yeah, good.
But so like it would be a case of being in the Bible department. There were a lot of people that I even knew personally that it would be like they would look at me and go like, why are you in the biblical studies department? Like, why are you here? And I'm just like, because I like learning about it. Like, honestly, I don't know what I want to do with this knowledge. I want the knowledge. Like, so I did get the comment multiple times of like, why are you in the department you're in? And I'm like, because I want to be.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, and that should be enough, but there's just this
Yeah.
weird pressure about, well, you have to have a plan of what you're going to do with this knowledge and where you're at and lay it out
Hmm.
perfectly. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
admittedly, going into college, a lot of times I would be like, oh, I want to do this. Oh, I want to do this. I 9 times out of 10, it was a load of crock. I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point.
I feel like it's a lot of pressure to put on anyone, let alone a young, impressionable person that has yet to see so many things that we're
Hmm.
supposed, and I'm not against college at all.
Yeah.
Great if that is something you want to do, do it. But just that pressure of like feeling like you've got to go in and pick out your life's destiny and lay out the path right then and there at
Hmm.
18 or 19 years old. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as you move through this and you're becoming more and more comfortable and aware that writing is where it is going to be,
Hmm.
what happened then? Did you just quit everything in the world and just write? Or were you spinning several plates in order to write?
So I'm spinning several plates. So I still work my day job, which I work for a image sharing website as content moderation. I still do that to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Positive being I work from home, so I'm
Yes.
able to write while I work.
Excellent.
Um, the goal is to eventually be able to write full time, fully. I've got a
Yeah.
lot of ideas. Um, but up until then, I always knew I was more of kind of like a art and entertainment oriented
Yes.
person.
Yes.
So for a while I tried doing some like video creation and stuff. And it just wasn't really for me. And that's what led to it was a dark time period because when you're
Hmm.
trying to get something off the ground that
Yeah.
you just aren't geared towards, that will sap your mental health.
Yeah.
And it was finally a breaking point that's when I looked at my wife and was like, this is stupid. Like
Yeah.
there's I'm grinding my gears. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I just kind of forgot because
Yeah.
yeah. Um but so I quit the video editing entirely, um and started working on the novel. Um got it. It took a lot longer than I wish it would have, and I'm trying to make the next one be shorter. It took about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Um, that's just because I got distracted so often. But
It happens.
yeah, yeah.
So, do you have a style? I know it can be hard to stick to a writing schedule, especially when you've got the day job, family life,
Mhm.
and everything in between. But do you kind of have sort of like, do you dedicate a certain time? Do you have folders for characters? How does it work for you?
So I admittedly am extremely disorganized in my writing process.
Okay.
Um, for my job, I work a lot of late nights. And thankfully, the hard part of my day job doesn't come from it being busy. It comes from the content that we're dealing with, meaning I get a good amount of downtime at night to write while I work.
Oh, good.
So it can be kind of iffy because my hours at work are iffy, but a lot of times I'll just kind of like, I got 7 hours in the middle of the night that nobody else is going to be awake. So might as well put on some music and write.
Yeah.
Um, I don't, I honestly, I would not advise a whole lot of people to do this. I don't really have any like files for characters or anything. Um, I fully just kind of wing it. Um, and I take it as a case of sometimes I let the story kind of be its own living thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of things that, so for example, the one I'm working on right now, I had a general idea. I had written like 60 pages. And I look at my wife and I go, this is, I have an idea, but the issue is I'm going to have to, of how to like make this work. But the issue is I'm going to
Yeah.
have to start over from scratch.
Oh,
And she's like,
no.
then start over from scratch. Yeah, but admittedly, I'm not nearly as organized with it as a lot of other people say you should be, but I feel like that just kind of works the best for me of think tanking it, essentially.
Are you a part of any writers groups, or do you have beta readers or anything like that?
Um, so I do not currently have any beta readers, which isn't a great thing. I did not entirely know what I was doing with publishing
Mm-hmm.
the first book. Kind of gearing things towards running a little bit smoother with the second one.
Yeah.
Um, I am officially a part of the Horror Writers Association, which is
Oh,
a
okay.
guild specifically for horror authors, which just recently joined. It's been very nice, honestly.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I had recently learned about a local group too that I'm thinking about attending. So I'm glad to hear, that it's been helpful for you. Which this also leads me to the publishing question. How did you decide to publish and which direction did you go?
So originally I went with self-publishing.
Okay.
And I originally went that direction, and at first it was kind of I heard a lot of horror stories from people who went traditional publishing of kind of like editors doing whatever they want with the manuscript and essentially. So I went that direction, and a month ago, while trying to get all this off the ground, because self-publishing, you essentially have to be your own team.
Right.
And I was thinking about how, like, well, maybe I should eventually hire a marketer or all these things. And I finally went, why am I continuing to, again, doing what I've done consistently with everything else at this point, spin my wheels, when at this point I haven't had a whole lot of feedback from my first book, but I've gotten not really any bad feedback. So
Okay.
people like my book. Why not just go traditional publishing? Because
Okay.
at that point, I do have a team that I don't have to hire on a marketer and a publisher and publicist and do all the distribution myself. And yes, there's the chance that I'll run into the issues with editors taking things and running things with them. But 9 times out of 10, the editor's gonna know better than me in those circumstances.
Okay.
So my next goal, I'm gonna try and get traditionally published, because it just I'm not tooled for all the marketing eras of stuff. I know
Yeah.
my writing's good and I know it's good enough to sell. I just cannot do that portion on my own. And when I'm going into hiring all these other
Yeah.
people that just comes with traditional publishing, I'm like, what? Why?
Do you think you'll give yourself like a time period? Like if maybe a traditional publisher doesn't pick it up within X number of months, that you'll go ahead and publish yourself?
I'll probably give it about 6 months. I'm gonna try and run through an agent.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Do you have one yet?
be, Not yet. I have to. So I can't traditionally publish or go through an agent with the one that I've already self-published, because they won't
Ah,
really accept it. So once I get this one finished and polished up a little bit, I plan on starting to query agents, and while I do that, starting the next book, essentially. Um, that way I can continue the ball rolling of getting things written, because I noticed that I was so preoccupied on getting the marketing and
yeah.
everything done on the other book that I wasn't having any time to write. Because
Yeah.
the moment I would sit down to write, my brain would go, okay, but what about working on getting the other book sold? And I'm like,
Yeah.
this isn't what I want to be doing. I'll take the pay cut. I also, like, my work's not going to be perfect by the end of it. I this is nothing against self-publishers, because this is like a thing that, like, for some people self-publishing does work.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the feedback I'm getting on self-publishing versus publishing are on internet spaces that I don't know the work that they've written.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily know if it's something, I don't know if there are any glaring issues that their writing has that's a reason why they're not getting traditional publishing. I don't know if they're giving the advice of, oh, self-publish because they have a vendetta against traditional publishers. I can't really know until I experience it for myself.
Yeah, and that is true. From I've talked to a lot of writers on here that have gone the traditional, the self, the hybrid, and they will say, the smart thing to do is know what you need, which is what you're doing. Like
Hmm.
if you do have to do a lot of the marketing yourself, and who's going to take a cut of what? How much of value is it and worth to
Yeah.
you to do? And yeah, sure. There is truth that some story a traditional publisher may not love, but the value in getting the story out to someone that may love it with self-publishing to me is worth it all. Um,
Hmm.
but I think it's just an experience, and if you are able to experience and choose, then go for it. I think
Yeah, exactly.
I love that we have more power though than ever before to get our stories told, that we don't have to turn it over to a traditional publisher and say, "You're my only hope." But,
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
also, if they're going to help you out and make it less painful for you in the process, that's excellent. So very good.
exactly.
I hope you'll come back and share with us, how your experience is going. I'd love to
Hmm.
have an update because I think it's important for writers to help writers, give the
Yeah,
honest feedback and let people know what they don't know.
exactly.
Because just like you're saying, I mean, we trust these people on these forums and or on
And
these groups, and it's like,
it's like I don't know what you've written. I don't know.
yeah,
Honestly, there are some out there that I've read for people, and I've been like, well, if you're giving this to someone, if you're trying to query this, there's a reason why you're not really getting any
uh-huh, uh-huh,
takers.
yeah,
And I absolutely love that it's as easy as ever to get your story told. But I
mhm.
also like sometimes it's the double-edged sword of it's super easy to get your story told, and then there are
Right,
people that aren't necessarily
right.
going through the motions to make it to give the story the polish that it deserves.
Yeah, I hear that. I understand that. Excellent. So what is the book that you're going to take to a traditional publisher about?
So the running title is A Mapping of the Mark Twain. It actually happens locally up near Texas County, Howell County area. Storyline being there's his father, his daughter is a cartographer, and she gets degree in geography and all that. Goes out into the Mark Twain to just kind of do a practice mapping just because that's where she hiked growing up. Figured it would be a fun project to do before she gets back into the workforce and everything. And ends up trekking through and just ends up disappearing off the
Hmm.
face of the earth. So it's about him trying to find what happened to her while dealing with the fact that he has developed a phobia of the woods. And kind of like this, there's this double-edged thing of the reason he developed the phobia being that like 10 years prior he started having this dream of there being a misplaced church in the middle of the clearing that him and
Ooh.
his daughter would set up camp regularly. And it just kind of like forces him into I need to avoid the woods at all cost mode. So he's already in kind of panic mode that she's gone missing, and they end up push coming to shove by the end of the book having to go in to find her. And there's like the reveal of there's the church in the clearing and everything.
So
And there's
sorry, I'm
go ahead.
thinking like, oh, the research in this. Do you have to do a lot of research for this, or is this all imaginative?
Um it's half research actually. I don't want to reveal where,
No,
but
no, no. Yeah.
the clearing actually exists.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
which is funny because I came up with the concept for the story before I found the clearing, which was a very weird experience.
Ooh, creepy.
Um but it's kind of half and half, honestly. Um I'll create the story idea first, but one thing that I really like doing is kind of letting things fit in story wise with real life. because
Mhm.
I feel like if there's a little bit of this is a place that exists,
Mhm.
it grounds the horror a little bit and makes it hit harder.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, tell us about the book that you just did the signing for.
So the book that I just did the signing for, Teen Death on Desecrated Faith and Newfound Religion, takes place 1860s Appalachia, up towards Afton, New York, which is actually where the area my dad's from. It's kind of so storyline being we have this guy, he's 20 years old, he is the son of their town's pastor. The pastor of their church has been a member, the patriarch of his family for 4 generations now. Well, at one point it's his turn to take over control of the church because his dad's getting ready to retire. And the deacons essentially look at the father and go, your son's not ready to take over a church. We're not going to let him take it over. We're going to put the deacon's head son in unless you send your kid to seminary.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have straight up looking at the father and saying you have failed at getting your son ready for this. So he ends up going to seminary. While at seminary, there's this thing that's continuing to stalk him, essentially. Just this shadow of a figure. As things continue going, he ends up losing his best friend that he made at the college. And it starts slowly being revealed that he's being essentially summoned by an outer being
Mm-hmm.
to essentially forsake his original beliefs and become what would be considered the high priest of this outer being. So the storyline kind of follows him unraveling the secrets behind that his family has kept from him and kind of making the grand mistake of conflating his family's trauma with the religion he grew up with and forsaking his religion and becoming the emissary of this thing that admittedly is probably worse than the family issues that he gave up on. And that saying that his family's issues are bad in and of itself, but this kind of God I created for the storyline, it's actually going to come up in other books as well. And this is where the theology degree came in, is kind of meant to be a reverse of like the Christian God, and that it's a conglomeration of all the different types of perversions. So it's essentially kind of giving to the main character, I'm giving you the right to take care of things on your own manner.
Interesting.
And kind of making the main character lose himself mentally as he falls more in league with this thing. I'm proud of it. It could have been better. I hope as much as I'll say it straight out. I hope it is my worst book.
Oh, well that's it. Okay. That's cool. I mean, you see where you want to grow.
Exactly.
Cool.
But a lot of people liked it so far. I know my description is a little jumbled up because I'm trying not to reveal too much, but I also like but yeah, I enjoyed writing it a lot. It's good. I'm hoping people enjoy it.
I think they will. Tell people where they can go to find your books.
You can find it either on Amazon. It is Teendyth, Tendyth. You can also get it. They have a few copies at ABC Books locally. And I'm recently uploaded on Ingram Spark. So if anybody is listening that owns a bookstore, feel free to go get some copies and stock from there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do hope you'll come back after you've got that next one either going or finished.
I would love to come back.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Follow along, find Stephen Mark, read his books, come back, and be sure you're following along. Look at all the videos we've got up for you. The podcasts are available on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. You can link over to all platforms from runradio.net.